The lights went out. That's what he told her after every hit. Not once, not twice, enough times that she remembered the phrase. Marek Svatos scored 32 goals as a rookie.
Inside the Shark zone, cutting in front, he scores!
He never fought. He never had to. 5 years later, he was out of the league. 5 years after that, he was dead. The dark turn isn't the part anyone saw. It's the part the sport had no language for. Košice is a steel town in eastern Slovakia. It sits closer to Ukraine than it does to Bratislava, and for a long time, the only thing it produced in numbers was hockey players. Marian Hossa came from the other side of the country. Zdeno Chara came from the other side of the country. The rinks are cold. The parents are colder. If you grow up there with a stick in your hand, you already know what your job is. Marek Svatos was not the most talented kid on the ice. He was the most obsessive. He left home at 18 to chase the draft, signed with the Kootenay Ice in Canada, didn't speak much English, and scored 23 goals in his first season anyway. The next year, he scored 38 and helped Kootenay win a Memorial Cup. Colorado took him in the 2001 draft. 7th round, 227th overall. To put that in context, more than 220 names came off the board before he did. The Avalanche at that point were a cup-winning machine with Sakic and Forsberg and Patrick Waugh, and they were using a late-round pick on a Slovak kid who looked like a high school junior. Nobody outside the scouting room was paying attention. He made his NHL debut in the 2003-04 season and spent the lockout year of 2004-05 back in the AHL with Hershey, learning the North American game. By the fall of 2005, he was in Denver to stay. The 2005-06 season is the one people still talk about. On October 10th, 2005, in just his 5th NHL game, he scored his first NHL hat trick in a 7-3 win against Calgary. He was 23 years old. By February, he had earned a spot on the Slovak national team for the Turin Olympics. By March, he had 32 goals in 61 games. 9 of them were game winners, which tied an NHL record for a first-year player. Then his shoulder gave out, and the season ended for him before the playoffs even started. But for those 6 months, he looked exactly like what Colorado had bet on. Quick release, bound space behind defenders the way scorers do. He was the kind of rookie a franchise builds around for a decade. His career high for penalty minutes in a single year was 60. He didn't fight. He wasn't built for it, and he wasn't asked to do it. Something was already wrong, though. It had nothing to do with his skating, his shot, or any opponent on the ice. Stop here for a second, because what's about to happen to Svatos isn't really a hockey story. It's a story about what the sport built and what it chose not to look at. CTE doesn't arrive like a diagnosis. It arrives like the weather. You don't see it move in. You notice it in the small things first. The decisions that seem fine in the moment and catastrophic in the morning. The mood that won't stay where you put it. The memory of where you left your keys 5 minutes ago, suddenly gone. The brain is opening accounts it doesn't know it's opening, and by the time anyone runs the numbers, the balance is already in the negative. The disease has been studied in former football players, boxers, wrestlers, and hockey players for over a decade now. It can only be confirmed after death. While the person is still alive, it looks like 100 other things. Depression, anxiety, substance abuse, a bad temper, a bad marriage, a bad year. The brain hides what it's doing because the brain is the thing doing the hiding. His wife Diana would later describe what he sounded like after a hit. He didn't say headache. He didn't say anything. He said the lights went out. She heard him say it so many times, she stopped counting. The injury record from 2006 onward builds out the picture the box score misses. In his second season, his goal total dropped from 32 to 15. He played through a recurring groin problem. In 2007-08, he was leading the Avalanche in goals at the trade deadline when he tore his ACL in a game against LA on March 1st. He missed the rest of the season and the playoff series after it. He came back for 2008-09 and got into 69 games, which would end up being the most he ever played in a single NHL season. He hurt his hand in April against San Jose and missed the last 3 games. The next year, under a new coach named Joe Sacco, he lost his top 6 spot, got bumped around the lineup, and finished with 7 goals. That was a career low. It was also the end of his time in Colorado. By 2010, the player who had once tied an NHL rookie record was a free agent nobody called about. He had at least 6 diagnosed concussions on his record. He'd had at least 6 surgeries. According to Diana, his memory was failing by the time he was 25, the age most players hit their prime. Team doctors had been prescribing oxycodone for the pain. Independent doctors had been prescribing more of it. Nobody in his life understood how much he was on. Colorado never publicly explained any of it. Not a mental health leave, not a personal matter, not anything. He was listed as unavailable, the same language used for a pulled hamstring. The franchise that had drafted him had no framework for what he was becoming. Neither did the league. He didn't retire. He kept trying. The first attempt was in Europe. He signed with Avangard Omsk in the KHL in the summer of 2010 and went to Russia for a few months. By December, he was back in North America trying to claw his way back into the NHL. St. Louis signed him to a 1-year deal in late December, then put him on waivers the next day to clear him to play. Nashville claimed him. He played for 9 games for the Predators, scored once, got waived again, and Ottawa claimed him in February 2011. The second attempt was a real one. For about a month in Ottawa, Svatos looked like the player he had been 5 years earlier. On March 27, 2011, he scored 2 goals in a loss to Atlanta. The second one was the 100th of his NHL career. A week or so after that, Toronto came in to play the Senators. The Maple Leafs sent out a 4th-line winger named Jay Rosehill. Rosehill was 25 years old, 6'2", 220 pounds, and trying to stay in the NHL by hitting people. He caught Svatos with an open-ice check. Svatos left the game with a concussion. He didn't play another shift for Ottawa. He never played another NHL game, period. He was 28 years old. The third attempt came 2 years later. Florida brought him to camp in January 2013 on a tryout after the lockout ended and cut him 2 days before the season started. That was it for the NHL. 3 franchises in 2 years. 9 games in Nashville, 19 games in Ottawa, 0 games in Florida. The player who had tied an NHL rookie record for game-winning goals ended his career with a roster line that read like somebody else's. Nobody publicly explained why. There was no language in the sport for what was happening to him privately. He went home to Slovakia. He played a season in Bratislava in the KHL, then signed with Košice for one last year and won a league title at home before retiring at 31. His family later described a man who could still talk about hockey for hours. He could remember every shift, every line change, every goal he ever scored. But he couldn't get through a morning without losing his keys, losing his train of thought, and sometimes losing his temper. In that order. He wasn't forgetting the game, he was forgetting everything around it. On November 4th, 2016, Marek Svatos was found dead at his home in Lone Tree, Colorado. He was 34 years old. The coroner ran toxicology and found codeine, morphine, and an anti-anxiety medication in his system. The ruling was accidental overdose. Diana didn't accept that as the full explanation. She had been watching him forget conversations they'd had 5 minutes earlier, watching him cycle between agitation and exhaustion in ways that didn't match the man she had married. So she donated his brain to Boston University. A year later, the pathology report came back. 3 pages. Stage 2 chronic traumatic encephalopathy out of 4 stages. Mood and behavioral changes, depression, outbursts. The disease had a name and a stage number, and his brain had it. Svatos was a scorer. He never had the kind of role enforcers had. He played 334 NHL games as a right winger who shot pucks for a living, took the normal hits that a forward takes in the normal run of play, and his brain still came back from Boston University with the same disease researchers had been finding in fighters. TSN reported in 2022 that of the first 14 former NHL players whose brains had been studied by researchers, 13 had been found to have had CTE. Svatos was one of those 13. The sport that produced the outcome generated billions of dollars in revenue across his career. The infrastructure for player performance was meticulous. Every NHL team had a head coach, assistant coaches, a goaltending coach, a video room, a strength staff, a nutrition staff, sports psychologists for confidence, sleep consultants for travel, scouts in every junior arena in North America and most of Europe. Some teams had analytics departments before analytics departments were normal. The infrastructure for what happens when a player's brain starts failing in his 20s was not underfunded. It didn't exist. There was no protocol for Marek Svatos. There was no specialist on retainer for the long-tail neurological cost of the job. When his memory started going at 25, no one in the building was trained to notice. When his mood started cycling, no one in the building was trained to ask. When he got prescribed oxycodone by team doctors and then more oxycodone by independent doctors, no one was tracking the total. Diana waited 6 years before she said anything publicly about what had happened to her husband. She told TSN's Rick Westhead in 2022 that she wanted her 2 children to be in a stable place before she spoke. When she did speak, she was specific. She wanted people to know that Marek was a good person who loved his family and made decisions because of CTE, not because he was a bad person. Those were her exact words. She also talked about the painkillers. The oxycodone had been prescribed throughout his career by team doctors and independent doctors. By the end, he was an addict, and the addiction wasn't a character flaw. It was a chemical answer to a brain that had stopped working properly years before anyone realized what was wrong with him. Every time you watched a player get his bell rung and come back 2 shifts later, that was the culture that produced this outcome. Svatos wasn't the exception. He was the system working exactly the way it was built to work. Marek Svatos has 2 kids. One day, they'll be old enough to type their father's name into a search bar, and the first thing they find won't be the 100 goals or the Olympic jersey. It'll be a pathology report from Boston. What do you think the league owes families like his, if anything? Drop your honest take in the comments. If this one hits, a super thanks goes a long way in helping me cover more stories like this. And also, please hit subscribe. There's another story coming soon that almost didn't get told at all.